In the late 19th century, European powers scrambled to claim African land, redrawing maps with little regard for the people living there. Britain, France, and Germany sought colonies for resources, markets, and national prestige. Belgium, a small and young nation, had no tradition of empire or exploration. Most Belgians were uninterested in colonies, seeing them as risky and expensive. But King Leopold II had other ideas. Obsessed with matching the empires of his royal peers, Leopold saw Africa as his personal opportunity. When the Belgian government refused to support colonial ventures, Leopold acted alone. He crafted a humanitarian image, claiming he wanted to bring civilization and end the slave trade in Central Africa. In 1876, he founded the International African Association, presenting it as a philanthropic mission. He hosted a grand conference in Brussels, inviting explorers and geographers to legitimize his cause. Leopold's real goal was to seize a vast territory for himself, not for Belgium. The International African Association was a front for his ambitions. He convinced the world he was a benevolent ruler, masking his greed behind charity. This deception set the stage for one of the most notorious colonial projects in history. Leopold's cunning would soon give him control over a land 76 times the size of Belgium. The people of the Congo had no say in the fate that awaited them. The colonial race had a new, unlikely competitor, driven by one king's ruthless ambition. To claim the Congo, Leopold needed a frontman. He chose explorer Henry Morton Stanley. Stanley, famous for charting the Congo River, was sent back to secure the land. His official mission was scientific, but his real task was to trick local chiefs into signing away their land. Chiefs, given gifts and complex treaties in foreign languages, believed they were agreeing to friendship or trade. In reality, they surrendered their land and people to Leopold. Stanley gathered hundreds of these fraudulent treaties, forming the basis of Leopold's claim. Leopold then lobbied European powers and the US, promising free trade and humanitarian reforms. His promises appealed to nations eager for African wealth without colonial costs. At the Berlin Conference of 1884-85, European powers recognized Leopold's control over the Congo. The Congo Free State was born, a name that hid a grim reality. It was not free, nor a true state. It was Leopold's personal property. The Belgian government had no oversight. Leopold now owned a territory far larger than his own country. The world believed his lies about philanthropy and progress. In truth, the Congo Free State was a private empire built on deception. The fate of millions was sealed by signatures they could not read. Leopold's rule would soon reveal its true, brutal nature. Once in control, Leopold's real motives emerged. He wanted wealth, not progress. Ivory was the first target. Elephants were slaughtered, and villages forced to meet impossible quotas. Leopold's private army, the Force Publique, enforced his will through terror. Soldiers kidnapped children, took hostages, and burned villages to ensure compliance. Men were forced to hunt ivory, leaving families vulnerable to abuse and starvation. The social fabric of Congolese life unraveled under constant violence. Officers were judged by the ivory they extracted, leading to horrific punishments. Soldiers cut off hands to prove kills or save bullets, creating a gruesome symbol of Leopold's regime. Baskets of severed hands became infamous across the Congo. The so-called civilizing mission was a cover for a vast slave labor system. Traditional life was destroyed, replaced by fear and brutality. The Congo Free State became a nightmare for its people. Leopold's greed turned the land into a kingdom of terror. The world remained largely unaware of the suffering within. The rubber boom of the 1890s brought even greater suffering to the Congo. Demand for rubber soared with the rise of bicycles and cars, and Leopold seized the opportunity. All land and resources were declared state property, meaning Leopold's property. Congolese were forbidden to sell rubber. They were forced to collect it for the king. The red rubber system was enforced with savage cruelty. Villages faced impossible quotas. Failure meant hostage-taking, mutilation, or death. The Force Publique terrorized communities, burning villages and killing hostages. The severing of hands became even more widespread as a tool of fear. Millions died from violence, starvation, and disease. Families were torn apart, and the land was stripped bare. The population collapsed as people lived in constant terror. The Congo became a byword for colonial horror. Leopold's greed drove a genocide masked as progress. The world's demand for rubber was paid for in Congolese blood. The horrors of the Congo Free State eventually came to light. Missionaries and activists like George Washington Williams and Edie Morel exposed the truth. Morel's investigations revealed the Congo was a slave state, not a free trade zone. Shocking reports and photographs of atrocities reached the public. International outrage grew, with writers like Mark Twain joining the campaign. Under immense pressure, the Belgian government was forced to act. In 1908, Belgium took control from Leopold, ending his personal rule. The Congo Free State became the Belgian Congo, now an official colony. The worst abuses, like hand severing, were curbed, but exploitation continued. The Congolese gained little freedom. The system simply became more organized. Resources were still extracted for Belgium's benefit. The people remained subjects, not citizens. The reign of terror ended, but colonial oppression persisted. The Belgian Congo was less violent, but still deeply unjust. The scars of Leopold's rule would not heal easily. Belgian rule brought order, but not true freedom, to the Congo. The colonial administration focused on efficient resource extraction: copper, diamonds, gold, and palm oil. Congolese labor fueled European companies, often under harsh conditions. The Belgians imposed a paternalistic system, investing in infrastructure only to serve their own interests. Railways and roads moved minerals, not people. Education was limited to basic skills. Higher learning was almost non-existent for Congolese. Cities were segregated, with the best facilities reserved for Europeans. Identity cards controlled movement. Minor offenses brought harsh punishment. Healthcare improved slightly, but political rights were denied. The population slowly recovered, but the people remained powerless. The Belgian Congo was more orderly than before, but still built on racism and exploitation. True self-determination was a distant dream. After World War II, the tide turned against colonialism. Across Africa, independence movements gained momentum, inspiring Congolese hopes. A small, educated elite, the Evolués, began organizing for self-rule. Belgium planned a slow transition, but unrest forced their hand. Riots in Leopoldville in 1959 shocked the authorities. International pressure and local protests made continued rule untenable. In 1960, Belgium abruptly agreed to grant independence within months. The transition was rushed and chaotic. The country was unprepared. Fewer than 30 Congolese had university degrees. The colonial system had deliberately excluded them from power. Independence came quickly, but the groundwork for instability was already laid. Independence on June 30th, 1960, brought chaos, not peace. The army mutinied, and the province of Katanga seceded with Belgian support. Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba was ousted and assassinated with foreign involvement. The country spiraled into crisis and civil war. In 1965, Mobutu seized power, ruling as a dictator for decades with Western backing. The colonial legacy left deep wounds, arbitrary borders, ethnic tensions, and an economy built for extraction. The political system was fragile, leading to dictatorship and violence. Poverty and instability became the norm. Belgium's colonial reach extended to Rwanda and Burundi, where ethnic divisions were hardened. Belgian policies set the stage for future tragedies, including the Rwandan genocide. The scars of colonialism are still visible across Central Africa. The consequences of Leopold's ambition echo to this day. Belgium's colonial past continues to shape Africa and Europe. The wealth taken from Congo, Rwanda, and Burundi built modern Belgium, while leaving those nations impoverished. Political instability and economic challenges are direct legacies of colonial rule. In Belgium, public debate about this history is growing. Statues of Leopold remain controversial, and calls for honest education are rising. Understanding this history reveals the destructive power of greed and racism. The Congo Free State's exposure was an early human rights victory, showing that activism can challenge injustice. The story warns us to remain vigilant against exploitation. Global inequalities today are rooted in this colonial past. Remembering these events is essential to prevent history from repeating itself.